Have you heard what real silence is? No, not the kind in a quiet city park or an empty room. I'm talking about the silence that presses down on your chest, enveloping you in a cold, icy breath, as if nature itself has frozen in anticipation of something terrible, but is in no hurry to show its true face. This is the silence of Antarctica. A silence that hides more than just frost. I was one of those who volunteered for this snowy station. A scientific base, away from everyone, the perfect opportunity for research. Everything was going according to plan until the ice mass began to breathe. That's what Rick, our geologist, said. He was the first to hear that ominous whisper under the snow. We laughed at first, of course. Yeah, snow doesn't breathe, everyone knows that. But as the weirdness began to build, the smiles faded. What the hell is going on, Mark? Mia's voice shook. She clutched the walkie-talkie tightly, looking at me as if she was waiting for an answer from me that God himself couldn't give. Everything around the station was dead, no wind, no sounds, no life. Just us and something we couldn't explain. I sat looking at the frosted windows. I don't know, Mia, but it's something ancient. Much older than us. My words sounded absurd, but how else to explain what we were seeing? Rick suddenly went crazy, lashing out at Josh with wild aggression. His eyes. They were impossible to forget, like an animal's, not a man's. We locked him in one of the labs that night. He's not Rick anymore, Mia whispered hoarsely. It's not just some kind of infection. It's a parasite, I interrupted. It's awakening in us, making us alien. It's getting stronger by the hour. That moment, something slipped outside the window. A shadow, quick, barely visible. My heart sank. I knew we were not alone. And this thing that came out from under the ice was hungry. Very hungry. Do you think we can survive? Mia clutched at my shoulder, her eyes filled with fear, panic, desperation. I had to tell her the truth, but how? How do you tell someone you're not sure if we're going to make it through the morning? I don't know, I squeezed out. But if we move fast, maybe we have a chance. I could feel that dread crawling under my skin. It wasn't loud, it wasn't screaming. It was a quiet, internal chill that penetrated to the bone. I thought of home, of warmth, of the fact that somewhere out there, thousands of miles away, people were still living their normal lives. And us? It was like we were stuck in this icy hell from which there was no escape. It all started with little things. At first, it was just a feeling. Someone said they felt a look on their face when no one was around. Then we heard rustling noises from under the snow. We thought it was the winds of Antarctica. But now I know it's not the wind.
Her life had been like a long, winding road leading to a single place, a forgotten mansion in the heart of an old, dark forest. Lily grew up in an orphanage, and every night, shadows would creep along the walls of a mysterious house in her dreams. These night mysteries continued until she turned 18. She had sworn she would never return to that gloomy corner of her childhood, where the walls whispered your name, and the darkness reached out with cold, unseen fingers. But fate, as if playing a cruel trick, led her back to the abandoned mansion. Lily came back to where her bedtime stories of terror began. She needed to find out why this place still called to her, despite the dread that gripped her very bones. She was looking for answers, or perhaps, she was looking for an end. Lily pushed open the massive door, and the darkness spilled over her like cold, black water. A draft swept across her skin, sending shivers down her spine like invisible hands tracing her neck. Why am I here? She wondered, her thoughts filled with doubt, but her feet moved on their own, carrying her down a narrow stairway into the basement. The basement was like something out of a campfire story, a place where fantastic stories of fear came to life. The walls were covered with old, dusty paintings, and the air was thick with the smell of wax and dampness. She froze, her breath catching in her throat as she spotted a faint light flickering from around the corner. She crept closer, her steps as quiet as a heartbeat in the dead of night. And then she saw them, figures, frozen in a dance of eternal fear. Her heart pounded so loud it seemed to echo in the small, suffocating room. "It's just a museum," she whispered to herself, "just old wax figures, nothing more." But the figures looked too real, as if they were only waiting to move. Lily reached out, fingertips trembling, ready to touch one of the statues when suddenly, the light went out. The room plunged into complete darkness, and then came the whisper. Lily held her breath, straining to hear. "You've come back." The words were barely a breath, but they seemed to seep from the walls themselves. She spun around, but saw nothing but shadows pressing in from all sides. Then the whisper grew, turning into a chorus of voices, filling every corner of the basement, making her head spin. "Damn it! What is this?" she muttered, panic clawing at the edges of her mind. She grabbed at the wall, trying to find her way back, but instead, her hand hit something cold and wet, wax. The figures began to move slowly. She heard a scraping sound, like something heavy being dragged across the floor. "They're just museum dolls," she kept repeating, but her legs wouldn't obey her. "You wanted answers," a voice murmured behind her. She turned sharply, but there was only a figure staring back, eyes hollow, filled with night's deepest darkness. "Now you will become one of us," the voice whispered again, and the figure took a step closer. Lily bolted for the door, but it slammed shut with a deafening bang. "Oh no. No, no, no," she breathed, tears streaming down her face. Her hands were covered in cold wax, and she could feel her fingers going numb. "This can't be real," she screamed, pleading with the dark, pleading with the sinister voices surrounding her. "Everyone who comes here pays their price," the voices echoed, growing louder, more insistent. Suddenly, she felt light, too light. She looked down at her hands and saw they were slowly turning to wax. "No, please, no," she cried out, feeling her body grow heavier, her limbs stiffening. The darkness closed in around her, and the voices became unbearable, a chorus of madness and despair. And then, silence. Lily felt herself hardening, her body becoming cold and still. She couldn't move, couldn't scream. But her mind remained awake, trapped in this new, horrifying state. Her eyes were frozen in eternal terror, the museum silent once more, as if nothing had ever happened. A visitor walked by, casting a glance at her figure. He didn't know that Lily was watching him, living in eternal nightmare beneath a layer of cold, unfeeling wax.
At the 2024 fair, sparkling with colorful lights and filled with the laughter of children, Little Lisa saw an antique doll. It looked completely different from the other toys, an old-fashioned dress, a pale face, and piercing blue eyes. Lisa, excitedly exclaiming, begged her parents for this doll. They saw nothing unusual about it, just a typical antique piece that would delight their daughter. A few days passed, and Lisa began to notice strange things. The doll, which she left on the chair, would end up in a different part of the room at night. "Mom, the doll moves on its own," she asked with surprise. Her mom just laughed, chalking it up to the child's imagination. However, one night, Lisa woke up with the feeling that someone was watching her. She got out of bed and asked tensely into the darkness, "Who's there?" The answer was silence, but when she turned on the light, the doll was sitting on her bed with a creepy smile. Lisa replied to herself with fear. This can't be happening. Each day, the fear grew. The doll moved more often, and its eyes became more lifelike. One day, Lisa made up her mind and hurriedly told her parents, "Mom, Dad, this doll is evil. We need to get rid of it." Her father sighed heavily and tried to calm her down. "Lisa, it's just a toy." At night, her parents heard a scream. Rushing into their daughter's room, they found an empty bed and the doll sitting in the middle of the room with a terrifying smile. "Where's Lisa?" her father asked with agitation, but there was no answer. Days went by, but Lisa never returned. Her parents desperately searched for her, but all efforts were in vain. "We searched the entire house, every corner," her father said with regret. "She couldn't have just disappeared," her mother added sadly. They hid the doll in the storage room, but one day while cleaning, the mother noticed it back on the couch. She grabbed the doll and coldly said, "You know where Lisa is? Speak." The doll only smiled wider, its eyes glowing with a sinister light, sarcastically noting to herself. The mother realized this was no ordinary toy. That evening, when the father came home, he found his wife in the same room where Lisa had vanished, holding the doll. Looking into its eyes, he felt a chill run through his body. "We have to get rid of it," he declared firmly. They threw the doll into the fireplace, but the flames didn't touch it. Doubtfully reaching out, the father picked up the doll and took it to the garden. When he returned, Lisa was standing on the doorstep. Sighing with relief, the mother ran to her daughter, but Lisa's eyes were just as empty and lifeless as the doll's. Laughing nervously, the father realized their nightmare was only beginning. This eerie tale, one of the most interesting stories filled with the mysteries of the night and true horror stories, would haunt them forever. As part of our bedtime stories, remember, sometimes the most fascinating stories come from the most terrifying experiences. This one, among all scary stories and night adventures, will linger in your thoughts, becoming a part of those campfire stories shared under the dark, starry sky.
Once upon a time, at the dawn of the last century, a woman named Eliza Hartman lived in this house, known in the area as a talented doll maker. Her dolls were amazing, each of them looked like life, and customers were ready to pay huge amounts of money for her work. However, no one knew what price Eliza herself paid for her art. It was said that she spent whole nights studying ancient books and experimenting with occult rituals in order to bring to life her creations. "The soul is the key to ideal beauty," she liked to repeat. One day, her little son Theodore disappeared. Surrounded by rumors and suspicions, Eliza withdrew into herself, continuing to work on dolls. However, her works became darker, and the dolls' eyes filled with a frightening gleam, as if they were watching you. After her mysterious death, the house was left empty and the dolls disappeared, as if they had dissolved into time. Many, many years have passed. The city was shining with colorful lights and was full of children's laughter. Little Lisa, walking with her parents, noticed an antique doll on one of the counters. It looked different from the other toys, an old-fashioned dress, a pale face and piercing blue eyes. Lisa excitedly exclaimed, asking her parents to buy this doll. Her parents, not seeing anything unusual in it, agreed. A few days after the purchase, Lisa began to notice oddities. The doll, which she left on a chair, ended up in another part of the room. "Mom, the doll moves by itself," Lisa said in surprise. Mom just laughed, attributing it to her daughter's rich imagination. But one night Lisa woke up with the feeling that she was being watched. Turning on the light, she saw that the doll was sitting on her bed with an eerie smile. It all started out quite ordinary. Lisa, as usual, was sitting in her room, surrounded by plush toys and colorful books. A new doll, which she called Emmy, stood out among all this cozy chaos. It was an antique, a pale porcelain oval face, eyes, bottomless blue lakes, and a dress, as if from another era. Lisa delightedly dressed the doll, told her about her day, and even read fairy tales aloud. But soon the joy began to give way to anxiety. When Lisa picked up Emmy, it seemed to her that the doll was getting heavier with each passing day. Sometimes, while playing, she caught herself thinking that these eyes were watching. As if there was something alive in the doll. Nonsense, the girl pulled herself up. However, at night, something changed. The silence in the room no longer calmed her down, but rather oppressed her. Muffled sounds, as if someone was whispering, came from the corners. Lisa tried to ignore it, but one day she noticed that Emmy was not where she had left her. "Mom, it seems the doll is moving," Lisa said anxiously at dinner. Her words were drowned out by her parents' laughter. "Of course," her mother answered, trying to hide her slight concern behind a smile. "You must have dreamed it." But Lisa knew something was wrong. By nightfall, her head would start to spin, and a strange heaviness would appear in her chest. She would go to bed with the feeling that the room was coming to life and becoming her enemy. And every time before going to bed, turning to the shelf where Emmy was sitting, the girl would whisper, "You're just a toy, right? Mom, this doll is weird." Lisa tried to convince her parents. She persistently explained how the doll moved, how its gaze followed her, how strange sounds were heard at night. "Mom, it's like it's alive," the girl almost screamed. But her mother only grinned and shook her head. "Lisa, you just watched too many movies and you're scaring yourself." Her father didn't take her seriously either. "It's just a toy, stop making things up," he said, continuing to read the newspaper. Despair grew inside Lisa. Her parents' words, their slight grin and indifference, like knives, pierced her heart. She began to doubt herself. Maybe I really made this up? Maybe I've just gone crazy? But every time she was alone, the doll reminded her of itself, with its gaze, rustling, or strange, barely audible whisper. The next day, Lisa met an old woman on the street who suddenly stopped when she saw the doll in the girl's hands. Her eyes flashed with alarm, and she leaned slightly towards Lisa, whispering, "This doll is not a toy. It brings trouble. Destroy it before it's too late." "What do you mean?" Lisa muttered, clutching the doll even tighter. The woman approached, her wrinkled face distorted with worry. "This thing is associated with pain and loss. You can't just leave it in your house. It will take everything that is dear to you. Lisa felt a chill run down her spine. It seemed that these words penetrated directly into her consciousness, as if the woman's voice echoed in her own thoughts. I can't. She's just a doll, the girl tried to object, but her voice trembled. Do you see how she looks at you? She knows that you are weak. But remember, as long as she's around, you're not safe. The woman turned sharply and disappeared around the corner, leaving Lisa in complete confusion. That night, Lisa decided to take action. Leaving Emmy in the room had become unbearable. She lit a candle to light the way, and, clutching the doll in one hand, headed for the basement. Her footsteps echoed loudly in the hallway, and the weak flame of the candle cast eerie shadows on the walls, as if the darkness itself was trying to stop her. When she reached the basement door, Lisa froze. She felt her throat dry up, and her heart was beating so loudly that it drowned out even her own thoughts. Gathering her courage, she pulled the creaky handle, and the heavy door opened. The basement greeted her with icy air that smelled of dust and something old, almost forgotten. The girl slowly began to descend the stone steps, trying not to look into the depths of the darkness. A thick, ominous silence reigned below. Lisa held the candle closer to her, illuminating the shelves with jars and boxes. She stopped at an old wooden box, placed the doll inside with trembling hands, and quickly slammed the lid shut. Now you won't find me, she whispered, trying to convince herself. But at that moment, a sound came from the depths of the basement, a rustling sound, then light steps, as if someone small was making their way through the boxes. Lisa froze. Her feet seemed to have grown to the floor, and only one thought was heard in her head: run. She rushed up the steps, but something below kept moving. The footsteps were getting louder, as if someone she couldn't see was climbing up behind her. Lisa tripped on the top step, pain shooting through her knee, but she didn't stop. When she reached the door, the girl slammed it shut and propped it up with a chair in panic. She was breathing heavily, looking at the handle, expecting it to start turning at any moment. There were knocks behind the door. Muffled, even, frighteningly measured. Lisa covered her ears with her hands, trying not to hear, but the knocks were getting louder, echoing in her head. Lisa, she heard her mother's voice. The girl shuddered, turning around. Her mother was standing in the doorway, looking at her daughter with incomprehension. Mom, there's something in the basement. Lisa pressed herself against the wall, her voice shaking. The mother came closer, looking at her daughter with weariness. Enough already, Lisa. You've really worked yourself up. The woman took a step toward the basement door and reached for the handle. No. Don't touch it. Lisa screamed, grabbing her mother's hand. But she pulled away. You're imagining things too much. Let's see what's really there, the mother said, abruptly opening the door. The noise in the basement suddenly died down, and silence fell upon them. But Lisa saw, from the depths of the darkness, eyes were looking at them. Glowing, cold, unreal. The mother turned to her daughter, her face distorted by a strange smile. It's okay, Lisa, she said, her voice sounding alien. We just want to play. Lisa froze, her breath caught, and her feet seemed to have grown to the floor. Her mother stood before her, but something in her gaze was more frightening than any shadow in the basement. It's not her, flashed through the girl's mind. Her mother's eyes, empty and cold, seemed to look through her. Come here, Lisa, her mother repeated, taking a step forward. Her voice was strange, as if from far away, filled with echoes of something alien. Lisa ran away, skirting her. Her heart was torn out of her chest as she rushed past the kitchen and grabbed the handle of her room's door. Slamming it shut, the girl quickly pushed the furniture to block the entrance. Footsteps were heard behind the door. Heavy, slow, each movement echoed in her mind. "Mom," she whispered, but there was no answer. Only a weak whisper, "Lisa, open up." The girl turned around and froze. The doll sat on her bed, its porcelain face shining in the soft moonlight, its piercing blue eyes seeming to stare straight into her soul. Lisa's hands shook as she retreated toward the wall, feeling the silence of the room become unbearable. You can't be here," the girl whispered, her voice breaking. The doll suddenly tilted its head, as if studying Lisa, and then quietly laughed. It was a child's laugh, but with some eerie, unnatural tone. The girl wanted to scream, but her voice was stuck in her throat. Lisa grabbed the nearest book and threw it at the doll. The toy fell to the floor, but the laughter did not stop. It was heard from everywhere, filling the room. "You can't run away from me," a whisper was heard. Lisa pressed herself against the wall, her breathing became intermittent. She knew that she had to do something, but fear paralyzed every movement. For a moment, it seemed to her that the air became heavy, as if the room itself had come to life. Gathering her last strength, the girl grabbed the candle and ran out of the room. She ran downstairs, towards the kitchen, where there was an old fireplace. "If I burn it, this will end," flashed through her head. The doll lay motionless on the floor, but Lisa did not dare to come closer. Finally, taking a stick from the fireplace, the girl carefully pushed the doll towards the fire. The flames instantly engulfed the porcelain head, and a long scream burst out of it. Lisa covered her ears, unable to bear the sound. But she did not move away until the doll was completely reduced to ashes. Silence. Finally, the house sank into an oppressive, absolute silence. Lisa collapsed on the floor, feeling like her legs were no longer holding her up. Her chest heaved, her breath came out in convulsive jerks, and her heart pounded so loudly that it seemed about to jump out. She looked at the smoldering remains of the doll in the fireplace, and tears welled up in her eyes. Bitter, burning tears. "I did it," she whispered, her voice breaking. "This is the end." But her words sounded empty, as if she herself did not fully believe in them. Lisa clutched the piece of burnt dress in her trembling hand, as proof of her victory, and a bitter smile touched her lips. At that moment, her parents entered the kitchen. Her father stopped at the threshold, and her mother came closer, frightened. "Lisa, what happened here?" she asked, her gaze darting between her daughter and the fireplace. The girl did not answer. She only pressed the charred piece of dress tighter to her chest. Her voice sounded only inside. "Now everything will be fine. Now I am safe." But deep in her soul, a shadow of doubt still stirred, a barely audible whisper. What if this is not the end yet? Epilogue. Years later, Lisa still remembered every moment of those terrible events. They became not only a childhood nightmare for her, but also an obsessive reality that she tried to understand and overcome. Her small apartment was furnished modestly, but in every corner there were protective amulets and candles, and the walls were strewn with symbols that she had drawn from ancient books. Lisa became a paranormal researcher, dedicating her life to studying things like that doll. She met with mediums, historians, and even tried to contact the woman who created the dolls herself. Her work took her to the darkest corners of the world, but the fear never left her. Every night, when she closed her eyes, she heard that same quiet whisper, "We will always be together." This voice haunted her since childhood, becoming her eternal companion. Lisa learned to ignore it, but deep down she knew it was only temporary. Then one morning, she found that the protective circle drawn in chalk by the door had been erased. On the kitchen table lay a doll. Its porcelain face, covered in tiny cracks, smiled with an ominous, familiar smile. Lisa sank to her knees, her breathing uneven, but instead of panicking, she rose, confidently took the doll in her hands and said, "You can't win." Now her fight was personal. She knew she would do anything to break the bond that had shackled her life. But could she defeat something that was always one step ahead?
Introduction. Adam was the kind of man who would never settle for less. Every setback for him became a personal challenge that could not be left unanswered. In his 30s, he had already lost his dream job, said goodbye to a girl who seemed to be the one, and was on the verge of depression. His outlook on life could be compared to a long-extinct fire. The embers were still smoking, but the fire had long since died out. "Well, life, are you going to make it rain now?" Adam glanced sarcastically at the sky, which was already covered with heavy, threatening clouds. He threw his backpack to the ground and leaned against the trunk of a tree. The forest was strange. Everything seemed ordinary: tall pines, dense shrubbery, soft moss underfoot. But every sound, every crunch of a branch seemed to whisper, "You're a stranger here." He hadn't planned the hike. He just packed at random and drove far away from people. The forest pulled with its silence, as if there were answers to be found there. The backstory. Adam has always been afraid of one thing: being ordinary. As a child he was teased for his weakness, as a youth for his ambition. He hated the silence. It reminded him of the fears that whispered in the back of his mind, "You're a failure, you're a nobody." His parents had always supported him, even though he thought they were boring. They said he was chasing too much and forgetting to live. But is it a crime to want more? Yet all their words echoed now as he sat in this wilderness. No home, no stability. Just him in this mysterious forest. Part 1, a call to adventure. The sun was already hidden behind the crowns of the trees, leaving the forest in a frightening semi-darkness. Adam was about to start a fire, but something made him freeze. A deep, seemingly ancient sound cut through the air. It sounded like a voice, but not human, more like an animal. "Who's there?" He exhaled hoarsely, turning around. The forest responded with silence. A firefly flickered in the distance. Not an ordinary one, but bright, like a small lantern. It couldn't be human. "Damn, this is definitely a bad idea," Adam muttered, but his feet were already leading him after the light. The forest seemed to move. The trees grew closer, branches reaching out to him like hands, and the air was filled with the heavy smell of dampness. Every step echoed, making his heart beat faster. "You felt it, didn't you?" came a voice. Right behind him. Adam turned around, but there was no one there. "Who's there?" he gasped, and the voice, like a taunt, whispered again. "Only those who seek answers." Part 2, crossing the first threshold. Adam froze. It was as if the forest had slid apart in front of him, revealing a path that hadn't been there a second ago. The light ahead now pulsed, beckoning. "Okay, all right. You want me to go? Let's go." His voice shook, but there was stubbornness in it. Step by step, he moved down the narrow path. The ground beneath his feet became softer, almost viscous. The branches of the trees whispered something, but he couldn't make out the words. The light disappeared. In front of him was an archway of stones wrapped in moss and roots. Inside it, the darkness was thick, almost palpable. "This is strange, even for a forest," he squeezed out, taking a step forward. As soon as his foot crossed the boundary, everything changed. The air became dense, still. The sounds disappeared. The forest was left behind. There was emptiness all around, except for distant, barely visible silhouettes like the ruins of some buildings awash in shadows. Where am I? Is this a dream? The voice sounded muffled, as if drowning in this strange place. But instead of an answer, there was a footstep. Someone else's, not his. Adam tensed, clutching the air with his hands as if that could protect him. I know you're here. Show yourself. A figure emerged from the shadows, tall, elongated, like a man, but too thin. It didn't speak. Just stood staring at him, faceless. Who are you? What do you want? Adam's voice trailed off, but he didn't move from his seat. The figure raised a hand and pointed forward. There, far away on the horizon, the same light flickered, but now it seemed like the glow of a distant star. You want me to go in there? Why? What's this all about? Adam didn't wait for an answer, but stepped toward the light. With each step, the space around him seemed to shrink. A sense of unease grew, turning to despair. The shadows seemed to reach out to him, whispering, You won't make it. You're weak. Come back. Shut up. He shouted, trying to drown out the voices. I'll find a way out. Even if I have to go through. He froze. Up ahead, right in the middle of the road, lay something huge. Black as the night itself. Part 3, Trials, Allies, Enemies. As Adam stepped closer, he realized it wasn't a shadow. It was a creature, huge, beast-like, with eyes burning like coals. Of course it was. You're guarding the passage, aren't you? He threw sarcastically, feeling cold sweat trickle down his back. The creature slowly rose to its feet, its breathing resembling the sound of a distant volcanic explosion. Great, just great. Now what? Do I have to fight you? The beast let out a low growl, and its eyes stared straight into Adam's soul. He felt fear surging inside him. That's your weakness, isn't it? Whispered a voice from deep inside his mind. No. It's not me, he clutched his head, trying to calm his panic. But the beast didn't attack. It just stood there, as if waiting for something. What do you want from me? Adam shouted. The answer was something unexpected. A voice, deep and inhuman, echoed in his head. You're looking for a way out, but first find yourself. What does that even mean? Adam was on the verge of hysteria. The creature came closer. It didn't attack, but as if offering something. Its eyes flashed a reflection Adam himself, but broken, frightened, like a worse version of him. No. It's not me. I'm stronger. I will find my way. Do you hear me? The beast stopped, and then slowly backed away, dissolving into the darkness. The light ahead grew brighter. Good. I'm coming. Adam exhaled heavily and moved on, knowing that the next step would be even harder. Part 4, Approaching the cave. Adam walked forward, but the light was growing dimmer and the shadows around him denser and denser. There was no sense of time in this strange world. There was no day, no night, only endless twilight. Every step echoed with a deafening thud. Suddenly, the air changed. The warmth disappeared and was replaced by a scalding cold that made my breath turn to white vapor. Damn, it's like this place has a life of its own, he muttered, pulling his hood up and wrapping his arms around himself. A huge chasm appeared ahead. Rocks gaped at the edges, their sharp edges resembling fangs. At the other end of the chasm was a cave, with a faint, wavering light coming from it. That way, of course, Adam grinned wryly. It could have been easier. But there was no turning back. He turned around and noticed that the path he had come on had disappeared. Only black emptiness behind him. Well, let's see what you have in store for me, Forrest. He took a step forward, but there was nothing under his feet. The abyss swallowed him up. Adam screamed, feeling the air whistling around him. But the fall lasted only a moment. He landed on solid ground, but felt no pain. Looking around, he realized he was inside the very same cave. The walls pulsed with a faint reddish light, as if liquid was flowing inside them. There were oddly shaped rocks on the floor, as if something had been carved out of them. "Why am I here?" he whispered, feeling the fear return. The voice he'd heard before came again, now much louder and closer. "This place will show you the truth. If you have the courage." "The truth? About what?" In response, a light flashed before him, and the cave filled with images. He saw himself in an office, at a computer, with a tired face. Then scenes from the past, a fight with a girl, her face full of disappointment. His parents sitting in the kitchen, their sad eyes when he said he was leaving. "Enough!" Adam shouted, trying to turn away. But the images kept flashing around him, as if he was being shown what he himself was trying to forget. "It's your burden," the voice was merciless. "You carry it with you. Everything you ran from, everything you rejected. Are you ready to face it?" "I don't know." "Then you'll stay here. Forever." Part 5, The Greatest Test. Adam fell to his knees, panting. The cave seemed to shrink around him, its walls shimmering ever brighter. "I can't. I'm just a man. I'm not a superhero, not the chosen one. I was just trying to live. And that's your choice. Accept yourself as you are, or give up everything." He looked up, his eyes full of despair. Something had changed in the images flickering around him. Now he saw not only his mistakes, but also moments of happiness. The first time he kissed a girl, how he laughed with his friends, how his mother told him she was proud of him. "It's all me," he said quietly. "The good and the bad. It's all me." As soon as he said those words, the walls of the cave shook and light filled the space. Fear vanished, giving way to a strange, warm peace. The same silhouette appeared before him, elongated and faceless. His voice sounded softer now. "You have accepted yourself. This is the beginning. But remember, the journey is not over." The figure pointed to the exit of the cave. "There is a reward waiting for you there." Adam stood up, feeling energy spill over his body. He took a step toward the light and the cave dissolved, leaving him at the edge of a new path. Part 6, The Reward. Adam stepped out of the cave, feeling the air fill with freshness. The forest reappeared around him, but it looked different now. The trees were taller, their crowns shining with a soft golden light, and the leaves looked like crystals refracting the light. "Beautiful," he murmured, stopping to look around. Up ahead, on a stone platform, lay an object that caught his eye. It was an amulet, shimmering with all the colors of the rainbow. It was as if it was calling to him, promising him something important. "Is this my reward?" Adam grinned, stepping closer. "Well, let's see what you can do." As soon as he touched the amulet, the world around him spun. His mind filled with images, endless stars, shining galaxies, parallel worlds. He saw himself standing at a crossroads, each leading to a different destiny. The voice came again, but now it was softer, almost friendly. "You have the key. It will open any door for you. But remember, every door requires a sacrifice." "Sacrifice?" Adam frowned. "What are you talking about?" "You can go home. Or you can go further, to wherever you find the truth. Choice is yours." "Go home," he whispered, clutching the amulet. Pictures from the past came back to his mind, his apartment, city streets, the face of that girl. Or finding out who you really are. He closed his eyes, feeling two desires struggling inside him. Part 7, The Way Back. Adam made a choice. Opening his eyes, he raised the amulet above his head and the world began to change shape again. The trees disappeared, giving way to an endless corridor lit by flickering light. "Is this the way home?" he asked, but there was no answer. He stepped forward. Every step he took echoed, as if the corridor wanted to remind him that there was no turning back. Suddenly he heard a familiar voice. "Are you sure this is your way?" It was her. The girl he had left years ago. She stood at the end of the hallway, looking at him with that very same expression, a mixture of love and disappointment. "Are you going to leave again, Adam?" "It's impossible," he muttered, looking at her. "You can't be here. I am your memory. Something you're afraid of losing." He took a step toward her, but she backed away, vanishing into thin air. In the same instant, the corridor began to narrow, the walls moving towards him, forcing him to quicken his step. "I can't go back," he shouted, feeling the panic rising again. A voice from the void answered. "Then find a new road." Part 8, Resurrection. The corridor disappeared, and he found himself in front of a huge gate. They were made of dark metal, covered in strange writing that glowed with a blue light. Adam approached them, feeling the amulet begin to heat up in his hands. "It was all leading up to this, wasn't it?" he asked, addressing the invisible interlocutor. "I've got to get through this." He placed the amulet against the gate. It creaked open and a bright light burst from within, blinding him. When his sight returned, he saw himself standing in the middle of the void. There was nothing there, no earth, no sky, just endless white light. "Is this the end?" he muttered, but his voice was drowned in the silence. Then a man emerged from the void. Or rather, a reflection of him. But it was a different Adam, confident, strong, as if from a world where he had made all the right choices. "You've come to understand." "Understand what?" "That the truth is always within you. All doors, all paths are an illusion. You have always been your own mentor." Adam was silent, feeling his every cell vibrate with the energy permeating the space. "Your choice now is to stay here, to accept this emptiness. Or go back. Back to where? Home. Or somewhere you haven't been yet." Part 9, Returning with the Elixir. Adam opened his eyes. He was in the forest again. The forest was dark, ordinary, and bird cries filled the air. Had it all been a dream? He asked, but his hand still clutched the amulet. He rose to his feet, looking around. The forest no longer seemed so frightening. He knew now that all fears were within him. "Thank you," he said, turning to something unseen, and headed forward. The light of the sun shone through the trees. Now he knew he could always find his way. Part 10, The Shattering of an Illusion. Adam moved through the forest, feeling strangely relieved. The air felt fresh and the forest no longer pressed its gloominess upon him. The amulet in his hand pulsed, but its light was beginning to fade. Was this it? Is this the end? He muttered. Now just go home like nothing had happened? The road changed again, however. Forest ahead disappeared, giving way to the old town. Abandoned houses stood in utter silence, their windows gaping empty hollows. Not this, Adam shook his head, but his feet were moving forward on their own. The city seemed too real to be part of this world. On a street corner, he saw a familiar silhouette. It was his apartment, the same one he had left years ago. No, it couldn't be. But there was a lamp burning inside. Adam went to the window and looked inside. There sat himself, but not the man he was now. He was younger, staring pensively at the ceiling as if deciding something important. "You can come back," a voice came from right behind him. Adam turned around. There was that silhouette again, the same guide, but it seemed more human now. Go back to what? It was all an illusion. Perhaps it is. But illusion is what you call reality. Everything you've experienced, everything you've seen, has been your choice. Adam squeezed the amulet. He could feel it getting hot now, as if ready to explode. What do you want from me? The answer. A final choice. You can go back to your reality, to your old life, forgetting everything you've learned. Or you can stay here, become part of this world. But remember, every choice has consequences. And if I refuse, then you'll disappear. As if you never existed. Adam laughed, his laughter echoing through the empty city. So that's what this is all about. This is a test. I choose. He squeezed the amulet as hard as he could and it flashed with blinding light. The world began to crumble around him, the city, the forest, even the sky itself shattered like glass. Epilogue, the last moment. When Adam opened his eyes, he was sitting at his desk. It looked as if nothing had happened. The monitor was glowing with an old project he had once never finished. He looked down at his hands. The amulet was gone. Had it been? Or had I lost my mind? He stood up, walked to the window, and looked outside. The city was the same as before, but something had changed. A voice sounded in his head, "You're back. But this world is no longer the same as it was for you." Adam smiled, feeling a strange calmness. He knew now that there was something more inside him. And even if it had all been a dream, it had changed him forever. He turned, grabbed his old jacket, and walked out of the apartment. This time, without looking back. The end.